She came with nothing but a crying baby and a past she couldn't hide. No husband. No welcome. Just the heavy weight of eyes that judged before they knew her name. The wind blew hard across the plains that morning. Dust curled around the wooden wheels of the stagecoach as it slowed to a stop in the small town of Dry Creek. Folks on the porch of the general store looked up from their rocking chairs. The postmaster stepped outside, wiping his hands on a cloth. No one expected visitors, not today, not this early. When the coach door opened, only one passenger stepped down. She was a young woman, though her shoulders were bent low like someone carrying more than just her bag. In one arm she held a baby wrapped tight in a pale blanket. In the other a small worn satchel. Her name was Lenora Wren, though no one in town knew that yet. She didn't look like trouble. Her dress was plain, her boots dusty, and her hair tied back in a tight braid. But it wasn't the way she dressed that drew whispers. It was the baby, the soft cry that rose from the bundle in her arms. The child couldn't be more than a few months old. Two women standing outside the mercantile glanced at each other. One tilted her head. The other raised an eyebrow. Everyone could see what they were thinking. No ring. Baby. Alone. Lenora kept her eyes down. She didn't expect kindness. She didn't expect help. She just needed a place to rest and maybe someone who would point her toward work. She had no money. No letters of introduction. And no family left to claim her. She walked toward the inn, but the innkeeper stepped outside before she reached the door. "We're full," he said quickly, not even asking her name. She looked at the empty porch and then back at him. "Even a corner? I can work, clean floors, scrub pots." "No rooms," he said again, firmer this time. Then he turned back inside and shut the door. The baby whimpered, fussing in her arms. Lenora rocked her gently, kissing her tiny forehead. "Hush now, Mercy," she whispered. "We'll find somewhere." That was the baby's name, Mercy. Not because her life had been filled with mercy, but because Lenora needed to believe it still existed. She walked toward the church, hoping the pastor would see her, hoping someone from the Lord's house might offer shelter or a meal. But the church doors were locked and the building stood quiet. The bell would ring on Sunday, but it was only Thursday. She sat on the edge of the wooden steps and fed the baby from a small bottle she had saved from the last town. Her hands shook. Her throat was dry. She hadn't eaten since the day before, giving everything she had to Mercy first. A boy passed by with a fishing rod slung over his shoulder. He looked at her, then looked away. No one spoke. No one asked if she was all right. And still Lenora didn't cry. She had cried all her tears in the town before this one. She had been judged before. Sent away before. Called names that didn't fit her. She wasn't Mercy's mother, but she loved her like one. And for that love she had been cast out more times than she could count. Still she stayed on those church steps. Because maybe if she sat near God's house, he would remember her. The sun sank lower. Her stomach twisted with hunger. The baby stirred in her sleep, and Lenora held her tighter, brushing dust from her tiny lashes. One kind face, that was all she prayed for. Just one. Everywhere she turned the answer was no. Not because of what she had done, but because of what people thought she had done. The sky was darkening now. The warm light that had touched the town earlier was fading behind thick clouds. Lenora stood slowly from the church steps, holding baby Mercy close to her chest. Her arms were tired and her legs ached, but she knew she couldn't sleep there. Not on the steps. Not outside, not with a baby in her arms. She walked down the street slowly, eyes scanning each little house. Some had candles in the window. Others had smoke rising from the chimney. She could smell stew, hear laughter, see families sitting together through the windows. It was a peaceful town, a quiet one. But not for her. She knocked on the first door with a lamp burning outside. A woman in an apron opened it. "Yes?" she asked, eyes going straight to the baby. "Ma'am," Lenora said softly, "I'm not asking for much. Just a corner in your barn even. I'll work for my keep. I just need a place to lay her down." The woman's face changed. Her eyes turned cold. "Are you married?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Lenora looked down. "No, ma'am." The woman folded her arms. "You should keep walking then." She shut the door. Lenora didn't move for a moment. Her heart beat loud in her ears. She kissed Mercy's cheek and whispered, "It's all right, little one. The Lord sees us." She tried another house. And another. One man didn't answer at all. One woman told her, "We don't have room for your kind." Another said, "We have daughters in this house. Keep going." No one asked her story. No one asked whose baby it was. They only saw a girl alone with a child and believed what they wanted to believe. By the time she reached the edge of town, her feet were dragging. The baby had started to cry again. Lenora found a patch of tall grass near a tree and sank to the ground, wrapping her shawl around them both. She prayed with her eyes open, watching the stars begin to shine. "Lord, if you hear me," she whispered, "I can't go much farther. If you sent us here, I don't understand why every door is shut. But you gave me mercy to care for, and I'll keep walking until my legs give out." She didn't know that someone had been watching her from across the road. Behind a small blacksmith shop, the forge fire had long gone cold for the night. But its owner, a quiet man named Boaz Talcott, had been cleaning tools when he saw her. This tired woman with a baby who looked like she had nowhere left to go. He didn't move at first. He was a man who kept to himself, a man who had lost too much already. His heart was like his work, heavy, shaped by fire, often hidden behind iron walls. But something about the woman's shoulders, the way she held the baby, the way she prayed instead of begged, it reached into a quiet place inside him that hadn't stirred in years. He set down his hammer and stepped out into the dark. Lenora was so tired she didn't hear him until he was standing near. "You'll catch cold out here," the man said gently. She jumped a little and looked up. She could barely see his face in the shadows. Just a tall frame, broad shoulders, and the outline of a kind expression. "I have nowhere else," she whispered. He paused. "You have a name?" "Lenora Wren," she said. "And this is Mercy." He nodded. "I'm Boaz." She waited for the same question to come. "Are you married? Whose baby is that? Why are you here alone?" But he didn't ask any of those things. Instead he said, "I got an extra room in the back of my house. Was my wife's sewing room, but she passed on. It's quiet. Got a little bed." Lenora's eyes widened. "You'd let me stay?" He looked at the baby, then back at her. "Just for a night or two. Town's not always kind. And babies shouldn't sleep in the dirt." Her eyes filled with tears. Not from weakness, but from relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Boaz didn't reply. He just turned and started walking, and Lenora followed, holding Mercy close. That night, for the first time in many days, Lenora Wren slept on a mattress. The room was small and the blankets were thin, but it felt like heaven. And in the room next to hers, Boaz sat in the dark, staring at the fire, listening to the soft breathing of the baby behind the wall. He hadn't prayed in a long time. But that night he did. Just when she thought she would sleep under the stars, a stranger gave her a key, and a reason to hope again. The small cabin sat behind the blacksmith's shop, near a line of trees and a quiet little creek that whispered softly through the night. It wasn't fancy. The wood was weathered, the porch leaned slightly, and the shutters didn't quite close. But to Lenora it looked like a castle. Boaz led her inside with slow steps, not saying much. He was a man of few words, but his quiet wasn't cold, it was careful. Everything in his cabin was neat. The table was clean. The fireplace gave off a soft glow. There was bread wrapped in a cloth and a jug of water by the door. He pointed to a small room just off the main one. "You can stay in there," he said. "It's not much, but it's dry." Lenora stepped inside. The room was small, with a narrow bed pushed up against the wall and a handmade quilt folded at the end. There was a wooden rocking chair beside the window, and an old sewing basket in the corner, full of spools of faded thread. "It's lovely," she whispered. Boaz cleared his throat. "I'll fetch more wood for the fire." Before he turned away, he looked at the baby in her arms. Mercy had fallen asleep again, her little chest rising and falling against Lenora's. "She looks like she trusts you," he said softly. Lenora's voice shook. "She's the only one who does." Boaz didn't reply, but he gave a small nod and stepped outside. Lenora laid the baby gently on the bed and covered her with the quilt. She touched her soft cheek and then fell to her knees beside the bed. She didn't cry loud. Just quiet tears, like a river that had finally found a place to flow. She had made it through one more day. In the morning, the smell of wood smoke and bacon woke her. She blinked in surprise. The baby was still sleeping, curled in the blanket like a tiny bird. Lenora dressed quickly, tucked Mercy into the sling across her chest, and stepped out into the main room. Boaz was cooking by the hearth, turning slices of bacon in a pan. I can cook," she said quickly. "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not," Boaz said without looking at her. "But I figure you haven't eaten a warm meal in a while." She didn't argue. She just sat down at the table, feeling more like a person than she had in weeks. He placed a plate in front of her, bacon, biscuits, and a slice of apple he had saved from the last basket of trade. "Thank you," she whispered. Boaz poured her some coffee, then sat down across from her. They ate in silence, the baby tucked between them in her sling. A few minutes later, Lenora spoke. "I'm sorry if folks in town talk," she said quietly. "They think Mercy is mine. She isn't. My sister died after giving birth. I was all she had." Boaz looked at her, steady and quiet. "I didn't ask," he said gently. "People talk when they don't know the truth. But I've learned, most don't care to know it." Lenora blinked, surprised. He added, "I buried my wife 2 winters ago. People said I was cursed. Said we must have done something wrong. They didn't know we just lost a child before her. Grief makes folks uncomfortable." His voice was deep and quiet, but the pain in it was clear. Lenora nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. Truly." Boaz looked at the baby, then at Lenora. "You loved your sister a lot to carry her child this far." "I did," she said. "And I love this baby like my own now. I didn't plan for this life, but it's the one I was given." Boaz stood and carried his plate to the wash basin. "You can stay here until you find something better," he said. "But there's work if you want it. I can trade shoes for horses and you can help mend clothes. My wife used to sew for folks in town." Lenora's eyes filled with tears again, not from sadness this time but from something warmer. "Oh, I'd be grateful," she said. "I'll work hard. I don't take kindness lightly." Boaz looked at her, eyes calm and steady. "Neither do I." That evening, as the sun went down over the creek, Lenora stood by the window in her little room, holding Mercy close. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight she was warm. She was fed. And she was not alone. And that, for now, was more than enough. Even after kindness found her, the stares hadn't stopped. Some doors remain shut, even when the heart is trying to open. The next morning, the sun poured golden light through the windows of Boaz's cabin. Birds sang from the trees, and the soft hum of the nearby creek wrapped the house in a peaceful hush. Lenora opened her eyes slowly. Baby Mercy was already awake, stretching and yawning in her tiny quilt nest. Lenora scooped her up and kissed her forehead, whispering, "We made it through another night, baby girl. Thank you, Lord." She stepped out into the kitchen where Boaz was already pulling on his leather apron. He was heating the forge again, stirring up glowing embers with slow, practiced hands. "Mornin'," he said without looking up. "Good morning," Lenora replied softly. "Do you need help with anything today?" He nodded. "Could use someone to sweep the shop and wipe the tools clean. I've got a saddle buckle to mend and a wagon axle to fix." "I'll take care of the sweeping," Lenora said quickly. "And maybe after I could walk into town, see if anyone needs mending done. Like you said." Boaz looked over, his brow furrowed slightly. "You sure you're ready for that?" She gave a quiet smile. "No. But I've walked into worse places with less hope." He nodded once. "All right. Just keep Mercy close." Lenora wrapped Mercy in a soft shawl, tied her to her chest, and made her way down the same dirt path that had nearly broken her heart just days before. This time she walked with her head a little higher. But the stairs came just the same. At the general store, Mrs. Finley whispered to her husband when Lenora stepped in. At the bakery, 2 young girls nudged each other, whispering about the baby girl who wandered in with her sin. Lenora said nothing. She simply asked gently, "Do you have any cloth scraps?" "I sew." The baker's wife shook her head. "We give our scraps to the pastor's wife." Lenora nodded politely. "Of course." At the post office, an older man named Mr. Tibbins gave her a second glance. "You staying out at the blacksmith's place?" "I am," she replied. He raised an eyebrow. "Folks'll talk." "Let them," she said simply. She returned to Boaz's cabin with empty hands but not an empty heart. She had not been welcomed, but she had stood tall. She had been stared at, but she had not fallen apart. She set to work sweeping the blacksmith shop, baby Mercy tucked close against her heart. Boaz came and went silently, the clang of his hammer echoing through the wooden beams. Later that afternoon, when the baby napped in her crib, Boaz stepped into the sewing room. Lenora was mending one of his shirts with slow, careful stitches. "You went into town?" he asked. She nodded. "They still look at me like I carry disease." "Give it time," Boaz said. "They'll learn." "Will they?" she asked. Boaz sat on the edge of the work table. "When my wife passed, they called her weak. Said she must have done something wrong to lose a baby and then waste away herself." Lenora looked up, surprised. He continued, "Truth is, she was the strongest woman I knew. But this town, it likes things simple. Me. When something doesn't fit the story they tell, they turn their backs." Lenora's voice trembled. "Then maybe I'll never belong." Boaz was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You belong here. In this cabin. For as long as you want. Her eyes filled with tears. What? You don't even know me. I know what it means to be alone, he said. I know what it's like to be judged without a fair word. And I know you've got more courage than most men I've met. That night, she lit a small candle and placed it on the windowsill. It was something her mother had done when she was a child. A sign of hope. A sign that someone was still waiting, still believing, still praying. The wind howled outside. But inside the cabin, warmth bloomed. Boaz sat in the chair beside the fire, sharpening tools. And in the next room, Lenora whispered over the baby's sleeping form, "Maybe this is what mercy looks like after all." She hadn't sewn since her sister died. But as her fingers moved across the fabric, she felt something she thought she'd lost: purpose. The morning came soft and quiet, with clouds rolling over the hills like wool blankets. Rain hadn't started yet, but the air smelled of it. Boaz was already outside, stacking firewood and preparing the forge. The blacksmith shop always woke up early. Inside the little cabin, Lenora stood at the window with baby Mercy in her arms. The baby was cooing softly, reaching tiny fingers toward the light. Lenora smiled. "Today's a good day to do good things," she whispered. She laid Mercy gently in the old sewing basket Boaz had found and padded to the other room. The sewing machine, though dusty, still worked. Her hands moved slowly at first. She hadn't touched fabric like this since before her sister's final days. Every thread tugged at her memory. But something had changed in her now. She wasn't sewing just to stay busy. She was sewing because it gave her something back. A little bit of dignity. A little bit of worth. Boaz stepped in from outside, brushing dirt from his sleeves. He saw the needle in her fingers, the small smile on her face, the peaceful baby watching from the basket. "You look like you've done that 100 times, he said. "I have," Lenora replied. "Before Mercy. Before everything fell apart." He nodded. "You're good at it." She met his eyes. "I want to earn my place here, Boaz. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said simply. She looked down. "That's not what the town thinks." Boaz leaned against the doorframe. "Town talks too much. But I see with my own eyes. And what I see is a woman who takes care of a child that isn't hers. A woman who sews with care. A woman who sweeps my shop without being asked." Lenora's eyes filled, but she blinked them clear. Boaz cleared his throat. "I got an idea. Market day's comin'. You could sew handkerchiefs. Baby bonnets. Things folks might buy." Lenora tilted her head. "Would they buy from me?" Boaz gave a slow smile. "They'll buy if it's made well. And it will be." She nodded slowly. "All right. I'll try." That week, Lenora worked with quiet focus. She sewed late into the evenings, baby Mercy sleeping beside her, Boaz's gentle hammering echoing in the background. She made small, simple things: a blue bonnet, a lace-edged cloth, soft towels stitched with tiny flowers. She sewed beauty into brokenness. And Boaz, though he said little, noticed everything. He noticed how she hummed while she worked, how the baby smiled more each day, how the room, once filled with silence and shadows, now felt warm again. Sometimes he'd linger at the doorway holding a mug of coffee he didn't drink, just watching her work. And sometimes when she caught him, he'd look away quickly, but not before she saw the softness in his eyes. Market day came with the first rain of spring. The streets were muddy, but the town was full. People bustled under umbrellas, wagons rolled in from nearby farms, and the air smelled like bread and wet wood. Boaz carried the small wooden box filled with Lenora's sewing to a stall near the corner. He built the table himself, with hands that once made shoes for horses, and now held space for a woman who was trying to rebuild her life. Lenora stood beside him, her dress patched neat, her shawl clean, baby Mercy wrapped against her chest. She watched as the first few women passed. They glanced. Some whispered. One looked straight at her and turned away. Lenora's hands trembled. But then a young girl tugged at her mother's hand. "Ma, look at the baby hat." The woman hesitated. Then she stepped forward and picked it up. "It's stitched so fine," she murmured. "How much?" Lenora spoke softly. 3 cents. The woman dug into her pouch and laid the coins down. "I'll take it." And just like that, a door opened. Then another woman came. And another. By midday, half the box was empty. Boaz stood quietly behind her, arms crossed. He didn't smile much, but Lenora saw it, in the way he looked at her, not like a burden anymore, but like someone who mattered. That night, back in the cabin, Lenora laid Mercy in the crib and whispered, "God is still writing our story, baby girl." Boaz sat by the fire, and when Lenora came to sit across from him, he said, "You did good today." "So did you," she replied. They sat in silence for a long moment. Not uncomfortable silence, but the kind that comes when two people don't need many words to feel seen. And in that little house by the creek, under the steady rain and the quiet crackle of the fire, something gentle was growing. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was the kind of kindness that prepares the ground for love to bloom. She thought she left her shame behind. But one voice from the past came riding into town, and brought all the hurt with it. The days had been gentle, like soft waves lapping at the edge of something broken. Boaz fixed wagon wheels and hammered shoes for the horses. Lenora sewed each morning with Mercy beside her. They shared quiet meals, soft prayers, and small smiles that felt like sunlight through a dusty window. But even the calmest days can change in a moment. It happened late one afternoon. The wind was sharp that day, blowing in from the west, carrying the smell of dry grass and dust. Lenora was hanging linens on the line when she saw the rider. A man on a tall, dark horse wearing a long coat and a hat pulled low. He rode straight toward the center of town. Her hands froze. She knew that posture, that horse, that voice. He dismounted in front of the general store, tied his reins and turned. It was him. Thomas Langley. The man who had promised to marry her sister. The man who had run when he found out she was with child. The man who had disappeared just before Clara's pain began. And now he was back. Boaz saw her face before he saw the man. "What is it?" he asked, stepping out of the shop. She didn't answer right away. Her hands were trembling. Mercy stirred in her sling. Boaz followed her gaze. "You know him?" She nodded slowly. "That's Mercy's father." Boaz's brow furrowed. "He never saw her," Lenora whispered. "He left Clara before the birth. Left me to bury her. Left this baby to starve." Boaz stood still, his jaw tight. "You want me to speak to him?" he asked. Lenora shook her head. "No. If he came to stir up trouble, I'll face it." They didn't have to wait long. By sundown, Thomas had found his way down the dusty road to the blacksmith's cabin. He didn't knock, just stood by the fence, tipping his hat as if the past hadn't happened. "Well, I'll be," he said, eyeing Mercy. "She's a pretty little thing." Lenora stepped outside, standing tall. "Why are you here, Thomas?" He shrugged. "Heard tell there was a baby. Figured maybe I ought to see her." "You heard?" "You didn't ask," Lenora said, her voice quiet but strong. "You knew where Clara was and you stayed gone." Thomas shifted on his boots. "Wasn't ready. A man has to choose his life, Lenora. I didn't choose fatherhood." "No," she said. "You chose fear." He chuckled, bitter. "You always were the sharp one. But now look at you. Raising another woman's child. Living in a blacksmith's shack." Boaz stepped onto the porch then. Silent, broad-shouldered, steady. "She's not alone," he said. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And you are." "The man who didn't run," Boaz answered plainly. Thomas looked at them both, then at Mercy. "Well, I ain't here to cause trouble. Just wanted to see." "You've seen," Lenora said. Thomas tipped his hat and turned. "She looks strong. Guess she don't need me anyhow." He mounted his horse, and within minutes he was nothing but dust on the horizon. That night Lenora didn't eat. She sat by the window watching the candle flicker. Mercy slept against her chest. Boaz brought her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "You were brave," he said. "I was scared," she replied. "That's what made it brave." She looked at him then. Really looked. "I thought if I ever saw him again I'd fall apart." Boaz met her eyes. "But you didn't." She leaned back in the chair, whispering, "Maybe I am stronger than I thought." Boaz didn't say anything. But his presence beside her, quiet, firm and faithful, was answer enough. Outside, the stars blinked across the sky like silent witnesses. And inside, where pain had once sat heavy, a new kind of peace began to settle. She had faced her past. And it had not won. She could face the stairs. She could even face her past. But when the baby's breath turned shallow, her strength began to crack. The next morning the rain had stopped, but the sky was pale. The trees stood still like they were holding their breath. Lenora woke early and reached for Mercy, but something was wrong. The baby was warm. Too warm. And she wasn't smiling. Lenora held her close. "Mercy," she whispered. The baby stirred but didn't make her usual sounds. Her skin felt hot, and her eyelids fluttered like she was too tired to keep them open. Panic rose in Lenora's chest. She stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, clutching the child. "Boaz," she called. He came from the shed, wiping his hands on a cloth. When he saw Lenora's face, he dropped everything. "What is it?" "She's burning up," Lenora said. "She's not eating. She's not herself." Boaz came close, placing his big hand gently on the baby's forehead. "She's got a fever." Lenora's voice shook. "What do we do?" Boaz didn't hesitate. "We go to Miss Adeline. Now." Miss Adeline lived 2 miles down the river. She was not a doctor, but in towns like theirs the healer was whoever knew the most and stayed calm when others panicked. And Miss Adeline had helped half the babies in the valley draw their first breath. Boaz saddled the horse and helped Lenora climb up with Mercy tied safely to her chest. Then he led them both on foot, walking fast, boots sinking into wet earth. The ride felt like forever. Lenora whispered prayers the whole way. "Lord, please, not her. She didn't ask for any of this. Please." Mercy was still burning up, her little body limp. At last Miss Adeline opened the door. "Come in," she said, eyes sharp. "I heard from town yesterday. Heard the past came knockin'. But this is what matters." She placed Mercy on a blanket by the fire and worked quickly. Cool cloths. Herbs steeped in water. Drops on the baby's tongue. "She's fighting something," Adeline said. "Could be her lungs. Could be just fever from the change in weather. We'll stay close tonight. You'll hold her skin to skin. Keep her warm but not too warm. Keep her prayed over." Lenora nodded, unable to speak. Boaz sat by the fire, holding his hat in his hands. He looked lost, more lost than she'd ever seen him. But he didn't leave. Not once. That night was the longest of Lenora's life. She stayed awake with Mercy on her chest, rocking slowly, humming lullabies her sister once sang. Her tears soaked the baby's hair. Boaz kept the fire going and handed her water and cloths without a word. Every time the baby stirred, Lenora held her tighter. "I can't lose her," she whispered. "She's not mine, but she is my heart." Boaz knelt beside her. "She's ours now." She looked up, startled. But Boaz didn't flinch. "She's ours to protect. Ours to pray for. And if the Lord lets her stay, then she's a blessing to both of us." Lenora's heart cracked open. She didn't know when it happened, but somewhere between her pain and his quiet strength, she had stopped carrying Mercy alone. By morning the fever broke. The baby's cheeks were still pale, but her breathing was deeper. Her hands moved again. Her lips curled just slightly. "She's turning the corner," Miss Adeline said, with a smile that lit up her weathered face. "She's a strong one." Lenora wept into her hands. And Boaz, he reached out and took her hand gently in his. For the first time she didn't pull away. That day, as they rode home slow and quiet, with Mercy sleeping peacefully between them, Lenora realized something she hadn't dared to hope. She didn't feel like a stranger anymore. She felt like family. She had carried her sister's child like a secret. But now, in a circle of lanterns and quiet prayer, she gave the baby something no one could ever take: a name and a place to belong. The sickness passed, like a storm that left everything softer after the rain. Mercy was smiling again, her eyes brighter than ever. Lenora could hardly believe how close they'd come to losing her. But God had been kind. In the days that followed, the whole house changed. Boaz swept more. Lenora laughed more. Mercy reached her chubby hands to both of them without fear. The cabin, once just wood and shadow, now felt full of warmth, of prayers, and of something Lenora didn't dare name. One morning, while boiling oats for breakfast, Boaz cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said. Lenora looked up. "Yes." He kept his eyes on the table. "That baby, she needs a name. A full name. One people can say without shame. One she can carry proud." Lenora stilled. She had never thought past Mercy. Never dared to imagine a future that needed more than just survival. Boaz looked up. "I was thinking, maybe we give her one. Together." Her lips parted. "Together?" He nodded. "You've raised her like your own. But if we want her to have a place here, a real place, then the town needs to see it." Lenora's heart thudded. Boaz reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden cross, carved and smooth. "Miss Adeline says the preacher's comin' next Sunday. We could ask for a blessing. Nothing fancy. Just us, the preacher, and God." Lenora held the little cross in her hand. It felt warm. "But I'm not her real mama," she whispered. "You're the one who stayed," Boaz said. "And that counts more than anything." Sunday came gentle and gold, with the light falling through the trees like God's own promise. Boaz had trimmed his beard, and Lenora wore a simple blue dress that once belonged to Clara. She tied a clean ribbon in Mercy's hair and kissed her forehead. Miss Adeline arrived first. Then came the preacher, an old man with tired eyes but a kind voice. They gathered by the river's edge where the water ran slow and clear. Boaz stood tall, holding Mercy in his arms for the first time. She looked so small against his broad chest, but she didn't cry. Lenora stood beside them. The preacher smiled at her. "You the mother?" Lenora looked down, hesitated. Then Boaz answered, soft but firm, "She's the one who loved her first. She's her mother in every way that matters." Lenora's eyes filled. The preacher nodded. "Then let's bless this child together." He lifted his hands and prayed. For a child born of sorrow but held in love. For a mother who gave and a mother who stayed. For a father not by blood but by choice. And for this home, may it be filled with peace. Then he asked, "What name shall she carry?" Lenora looked to Boaz. He gently bounced Mercy in his arms and said, "Mercy Hope Whitlow." Whitlow, his name. Lenora's hand flew to her mouth. He turned to her. "If you'll allow it." She stepped closer, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, she's yours too." The preacher smiled. "Then today Mercy Hope Whitlow is welcomed into your hearts, your home, and his grace." Later that evening, after the others left, Lenora stood at the edge of the porch with the baby in her arms. Boaz stepped up behind her. "You gave her a future," she said softly. He shook his head. "You gave her a start. I just want to walk beside you both." She looked at him then, not as the blacksmith who gave her shelter, not as the man who'd stayed silent and kind, but as something more. Something God had planted. Something still growing. She smiled. And for the first time she believed it might truly last. He never dropped to one knee. She never wore white lace. But under the open sky and the eyes of a growing child, love found its voice in the quiet. The days after the naming were peaceful. Mercy giggled more. Lenora sang again while sweeping the floor. Boaz began coming home from the forge with a fresh loaf from the baker's, or a ribbon he said was left behind at the store. Though Lenora knew better. They were building something. No papers. No titles. Just trust. One cool evening Lenora sat outside after supper. Mercy slept nearby in a basket lined with wool. The stars blinked above like soft lanterns in the sky. Boaz joined her, sitting close but not too close. He held 2 mugs of tea and passed her one. She smiled, grateful. The silence between them was comfortable now. Like a blanket that didn't need adjusting. "I've been thinking," Boaz said at last, "about winter." She turned toward him. "About firewood?" He chuckled softly. "That too. But mostly about the 3 of us." She looked down at her hands. Boaz went on. "Folks in town, they already talk. Some don't understand how we live. Some think it's not proper. A man and woman under the same roof, with a baby that ain't theirs." Lenora swallowed. "I know." Boaz nodded. "But I ain't worried about them. I'm thinking about you. And Mercy. What's fair? What's right?" He paused. "I never meant for this to happen, not like this. But now that it has, I can't imagine life any other way." Lenora's heart beat louder than the crickets. Boaz took a slow breath. "I don't have fancy words. And I can't give you a big church wedding or a house full of silver. But I can give you my hands. My name. My promise to protect you both till I've got no breath left." He didn't say marry me. He didn't have to. Lenora reached for his hand and placed hers on top. "You already have our hearts," she said softly. "We don't need lace or music. We just need you to stay." His eyes shimmered. And though no vows were spoken aloud, something holy passed between them in the quiet. Later that night, Boaz carried Mercy to her cradle. He brushed his thumb across her cheek and whispered, "Good night, little one." Lenora watched him from the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, not out of fear now but out of something deeper. She didn't feel like a burden anymore. She felt chosen. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Lenora whispered to the Lord, "Thank you for giving me more than I asked for. Not riches, not revenge, but peace, a place, and someone who stays." Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, love spoke without sound. And it was enough. She came to town with shame on her back and a baby in her arms. But what she found was something no one could take: dignity, family, and a quiet kind of forever. Winter came slow that year, like it didn't want to disturb the peace. The first snow dusted the rooftops like powdered sugar. Smoke curled from chimneys and children's laughter echoed through the streets. Everyone in town was preparing for the Christmas gathering at the chapel. Everyone, including Boaz, Lenora, and baby Mercy. It had been nearly a year since she arrived. A year since she stepped off that coach, heart pounding, holding a baby who wasn't hers, and wondering if she'd be turned away. Now she stood in a home that smelled of cedar and bread. A home with boots by the door that weren't only hers. A home where Mercy's laughter filled the rooms. Lenora sat by the fire, sewing a new dress for the baby. She stitched slowly, carefully, humming a soft tune her mother once sang. Boaz entered, brushing snow from his coat. "She'll outgrow that dress before spring," he teased. "Then she'll have another," Lenora smiled. He kissed the top of her head, then knelt by the cradle. Mercy giggled and reached for his beard. She called him Dada, now. The first time it happened, Boaz cried. At church that evening, the candles flickered low, and the pews filled with neighbors wrapped in shawls and scarves. Miss Adeline saved a spot for them near the front. The preacher spoke of the Christ child, born poor, born rejected, born into something that didn't look like hope, but was. Lenora held Mercy close and wept quietly. Not from sorrow this time, but from something deeper. Gratitude. When the service ended, Boaz reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden ring. Smooth. Carved with a cross on the inside. He took Lenora's hand right there in the aisle. "It's not gold," he said, "but I shaped it with my own hands." She stared at it, then at him. He didn't have to ask again. She nodded, eyes full of tears, and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And so did she, in this life, in this place, with this man. Back at the cabin, they placed Mercy in her cradle and sat by the fire in silence. Snow fell soft outside. Boaz held Lenora's hand. "I used to think I'd live alone forever," he said. "Just work. Just quiet. But you and that little girl, you gave me a reason to come home." Lenora whispered, "And you gave me a name that wasn't shame." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I thought I was just carrying a burden," she said, voice low. "But she was a blessing. And so were you. Some blessings come wrapped in pain. Some come after loss. Some arrive when no one opens the door. But this one, a baby left behind, a blacksmith with a tender heart, and a woman the world tried to shame, this blessing built something strong. And in that quiet house at the edge of town, with the fire crackling and the cradle rocking gently, love finally felt safe. Dear listener, if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember that God still works through broken beginnings. Leave a comment below. What part of Lenora's journey moved you the most? And remember, you are never too far gone to be part of something beautiful. You are not a burden. You are a blessing. Stay tuned for more emotional Western stories filled with faith, hope, and the quiet strength of love. God bless you.